Welcome, everybody, to another Truth Seeking. This is the Friday edition of our Thursday show with Jay Young here. What's up, Jay? How's it been going?
Life's good. I'm heading to Orlando in a couple weeks with my good buddy Angel and his family, and should be fun. It's been literally
Don't
about
let,
50 years since I've been to Disney, so this will be
don't
nice.
don't let the feds know. No,
Exactly. They'll find a way to tax it, whatever it is.
I'm just yeah, yep. They're tracking you everywhere, Jay.
That's right.
You're on the list, buddy.
You're on a list, multiple lists probably now.
We're on the list, man.
With the amount of and the of material that I torrent, over or send over torrents, yeah, I'm probably on multiple lists now.
Yeah. Well, the topic of tonight's conversation, we wanted to talk about food and the benefits of eating from home and home cooking. And especially with the way the world is right now, I think it's important for folks to start thinking about this as the price of oil continues to increase with the whole conflict in Iran. And it's just going to be more expensive to eat out. The food quality that you're going to get in a restaurant is not going to be as high as what you could find with local food that you're sourcing yourself or growing yourself and cooking from home. And this was spurred on by some of my recent travels and going to some restaurants, particularly more high end restaurants, and then being like kind of disappointed, being really disappointed actually in the food quality from some of these restaurants. So it had been a while since I'd been out to eat, and going into the restaurants, I'm just kind of like, this is nowhere near like the local meat that we sourced from our buddy John.
Right.
This was like miles apart from what that tastes like. And so it just kind of hit me. It's like, wow, these restaurants are garbage.
Right.
um and so yeah, that's what the topic of the conversation is going to be about tonight. And there's multiple factors to why this is the case, and it is um across the board for the most part for most restaurants out there, unless they're a very specific niche kind of restaurant that's like sourcing local foods, and the chef is like really cares about the ingredients and things like that, that it's very probably going to be pretty expensive to eat at a restaurant like that.
Yep.
Whereas the same quality or better you could achieve on your own, I believe, um, by cooking for yourself at home.
Yeah.
Um, you've been doing this, and you've been doing like the carnivore diet for a while, huh, Jay?
Yeah, it's getting 2.5 years now. And I'm very happy that I've flipped over. I went vegan probably over a decade ago. Tried it for about a year, and my results, they were fine, right? No big deal. But the more I learned about just basic nutrition and basic metabolic health, the more I realized that plants are bad for us. They're trying to kill us, and we are hyper carnivores, right? And the definition of a hyper carnivore is where they obtain 70% of their calories, 70% or more of their calories from animals. And so we are very much in alignment with um, um, canines, felines, right? Carrion birds. Our stomachs are more acidic. They have lower pH than canines and felines, and we're just a little bit less acidic than carrion birds, buzzards, vultures, etc. And so when I started to kind of understand that, that really changed my attitude about diet and nutrition and metabolic health. And because of that, I look at food a lot differently now. not that long ago, I looked at food as a source of entertainment, right? It wasn't just, calories and subsistence, but it was a form of entertainment. Now, 95% of my diet is carnivore. I go out, typically do one cheat meal per week. And, but now I have a very, very different attitude. And a lot of people, when I talk about this, they say, well, doesn't it get old? Doesn't it get boring? And I think about how I had brain fog before, had high changes in variability in energy levels throughout the day, and that's gone. And I think to myself, no, I don't get sick and tired of feeling better than I did, 2.5 years ago. I don't get sick and tired of having no brain fog. That makes a big difference. So that change in attitude really helps keep me motivated, keeps me, in line. And part of this, what I think you talked about, is what's in the restaurants is it's not good for us. It's not good. We're seeing engineered foods, processed foods, ultra processed foods, and all. Like I said, I do typically one cheat meal per week, so that's my 5%. And pretty much every time I leave, I don't feel good. And so it's nice. It's nice to have the variety, but I pay for it.
Yep. So I have a little infographic here on the major food companies that control most of the food products that are out there in the market here. And so we've got PepsiCo, General Mills, Kellogg's, Associated British Foods, Mondelez, Mars, Dannon, Unilever, Coca-Cola, Nestle. So a lot of these companies are the ones that are putting out a lot of the processed foods and a lot of the stuff that you'll find in the grocery stores today. And it's all dependent on trucking and logistics and distribution. And for a lot of these things that get shipped to you, you are going to be losing nutrient value. There's a really good book out there that talks about the nutrition levels. I think it's called Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon. But as soon as you pick that food that you are, if it's produce, you're losing nutrition as soon as you're pulling it from the plant.
Mm-hmm.
So like you were saying, I think the animals are really good at processing these, fruits and vegetables and grasses and stuff like that because of their stomachs set up, and they're extracting a lot more of that out of themselves and into the animal.
Yep.
And I haven't adhered to the carnivore diet like really strictly, but made it like more of a main focus as I was working on my fitness, and did notice some major changes. I've since then gone back to eating garbage and a lot of this other kind of processed foods and stuff, and a lot of those things have come back, like you were talking about, difficulty thinking, having good energy levels. A lot of that stuff you'll realize it once you start getting into it, because it's a total mind shift, actually. Like and you can run that experiment on yourself, going from the standard American diet of a lot of processed foods, eating out a lot, to doing more stuff at home and changing your diet to doing something more like a carnivore diet. Now, when you cook, do you cook a lot with like the animal fats, or do you use butter? Like, how do How do you do a lot of that?
Yeah. So the majority of my cooking fats are beef tallow. The next would probably be an even split between bacon grease and ghee. And so all that is stuff that I render. So for the tallow, I've gotten fats either from our friend John Tejan or another local place, Flint River Farms here on Route 431. And so, I get fat there. So I'll render my own fat for the beef tallow. Bacon grease, you get that from bacon, obviously. And then for ghee, I just get regular butter, unsalted butter, and I will turn that into ghee, and that's really great. We're seeing more and more evidence that falsifies the so-called cholesterol hypothesis. That's proven to be false, and we're seeing more and more evidence to falsify what assertions people such as Enzo Keys has made in regards to the necessity of plant-based diets. And also we're seeing more and more evidence that he was paid by the Sugar Research Council, or Sugar Research Foundation, to come up with certain research and basically manufacture conclusions out of so-called research. And so it was all fraudulent, and he was never required. He never divulged publicly, where the money came from. And I don't care if a group is sponsoring research. I have no problems with it as long as it's upfront and honest and it's made very public. And this was the exact opposite of that. So I think that we're finally starting to see that a lot of these things are baloney. And when we start to see essential nutrients such as D3, K2, carnosine, carnitine, I think vitamin E, we can only get these, creatine, creatine, we can only get these through animal sources. B12, we can only get those through animal sources. Retinol, and it's really sad that these frauds have been perpetrated on the West by people, going back to the 50s and 60s, and even the Kellogg and Post group, right? They've tried to push more grain-based diets, and we're seeing that fiber is bad for us, oxalates are bad for us, plant defense chemicals are bad for us, and anti-nutrients are bad for us. So these are four major categories, and we only see these in plants. We don't see these in animal products. We don't see these in meat and organ products. So it's sad that these frauds have been perpetrated on the American public.
You ever run across Dr. Ken Berry?
I love that guy. He's just north of us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, I remember at one of the Self-Reliance festivals that I went to, he gave a whole talk about how it was in the feudal times that in order to keep the populations from getting too rowdy, that they would have grain is the main source of food.
That's right.
While the royalty would eat a lot of the animals and a lot of that stuff for themselves. They'd keep all that stuff for themselves.
Yep.
What's up? I know that. It's my cousin's wife.
Nice.
How you doing?
Nice. Yeah, and that's a good point. That was something that I think was the Kellogg group. I apologize if I get this wrong, but basically these are Seventh-day Adventists who were promoting. They were basically anti-meat, and they were promoting plant-based diet as much as you talked about. And not exactly the same, but very, very, very much parallel to that was to try to get rid of lustful thoughts and lustful actions, and meat promotes that. And so there was no scientific evidence to support this, and we have an inordinate amount of scientific evidence to support the exact opposite. It falsifies all those assertions. And it was purely social engineering. That's all this was. It was an attempt to do this. I will say this: in some ways, we could argue that it does reduce some of those, I'll say, energetic tendencies. But the reason why is because carbs as a primary source of fuel is so bad for us. It can make us lethargic. It can reduce our testosterone, right? Healthy testosterone, and it can throw our testosterone estrogen balances way off. And for both males and females. So in some ways it kind of does do what they were talking about, but I don't think in the way that they intended.
Right. And we were talking a little bit pre-show, but I have an article up about glyphosate. So there was this one comes from activist posts. The title of the article is "Who Needs Glyphosate?" So, and apparently this one comes from Joel Salatin, the lunatic farmer. But says President Donald Trump's executive order of February 18th invoking the Defense Production Act of 1915 to ensure U.S. glyphosate production and availability neither necessary nor helpful. HHS Secretary Make America Healthy Again, MAHA founder Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement of the order has created a firestorm in that health interested base. February 22nd, Kennedy conducted triage explanations to his base with this statement. Unfortunately, our agricultural system depends heavily on these chemicals. He went on to post that if these inputs disappeared overnight, crop yields would fall, food prices would surge, and America would experience a massive loss of farms even beyond what we are witnessing today. The consequences would be disastrous. So I believe, this is coming from a lot of people filing lawsuits against Bayer Monsanto. This showdown has been a long time developing. On April 14, 2025, the Wall Street Journal's Patrick Thomas reported that Bayer said it could stop producing the world's most popular weed killer unless it gets court protection against lawsuits blaming the herbicide for causing cancer. Bayer and friends tried to slip liability protection in an appropriations bill earlier this year, but that effort failed. With thousands of lawsuits, many of them winning, still scheduled for court hearings, and its multi-billion-dollar war chest to fight them and or settle them impacting profits, Bayer, manufacturer of the popular Roundup brand, is desperate to shed this liability. Most of the time, things like this executive order happen after long-term wrangling and cogitating behind the curtain. And I suspect that is the case now. So it goes on to explain more about what all is going into glyphosate, things that are being glyphosated. At the risk of irritating my Maha friends, I take umbrage with this whole sword affair because glyphosate is a deadly poison. It is not needed and certainly does not jeopardize American security. Its use is primarily on genetically modified corn and soybeans, but consider that nearly half of America's corn production goes to ethanol fuel. It has nothing to do with food. What about soybeans? Half of them are exported and not even used in America. Roughly 40% of the glyphosate is made by Bayer in the United States, Belgium, and Argentina, which are all friendlies. If we eliminated half the corn and half the soybeans because they aren't needed for food, we'd only need half the glyphosate, which is nearly all manufactured either domestically or in friendly nations. That's giving the benefit of the doubt to the inherent need for glyphosate, which is a dubious argument. It's like demanding special concessions for cocaine because some addicts have an inherent need for cocaine. While they may be addicted, arguing that funding and fueling their continued addiction is necessary for their survival is dubious at best and erroneous at worst. The real national security breach is that we have thousands of farmers producing unnecessary corn and soybeans and a federal government determined to keep them in business. Like we were saying earlier, herbivores don't need grain. They were not built to eat grain any more than children were built to eat candy bars. If we drop exports and drop the fuel, America's need for corn and soybeans is only 30% of current production, which can easily be met by the glyphosate produced domestically and in friendly nations. The point is none of the scaremongering and none of the math adds up or makes sense. Something else is going on here. Has nothing to do with national defense. It has to do with offering a shield of protection to arguably the most egregious agricultural chemical on the planet. It's also a financial windfall for Bayer. So,
if I could add to that, can we scroll up just a little bit? Go back to where we talk about grain. Herbivores don't need grain. They were not built to eat grain any more than children were built to eat candy bars. This is something, I wouldn't call it a debate. It's just something that's discussed often in the carnivore, ketogenic group communities. And it's the whole concept of grain finished versus grass finished. And morally, I have no problems if someone wants to eat grain finished beef. It's fine. If that's how someone wants to do it, that's fine. There is a huge advantage to doing grain finished because it definitely fattens up the cow for sure. There's no doubt about it. The downside though to that is when it's grain finished, it turns their digestive system acidic, and the cow digestive system is really perfect for bacteria production and maintenance, and it's the bacteria that break down the cellulose in the grass. And so it really ruins their digestive tract. It also causes about 1/3 of the cattle to have diseased livers because they can't handle that major change. So I'm not blaming anyone who wants to go with grain finished. It's tasty and it makes for really tender beef, no doubt about it. But many of us, and I'm definitely of this opinion, I'm cool with doing grass finished because I want the cattle to be healthy for its entire life. I don't want its digestive system to be diseased. I don't want its livers to be diseased. And so for me, I'm happy to have a little bit less fat on the beef and not as tender. And this has become a little bit maybe a little bit of a sticking point in the carnivore ketogenic discussion group. But this is something that people do talk about.
Yeah, and glyphosate, not a good chemical to be getting in your body.
Yep.
With a lot of like they were saying, a lot of these were lawsuits, and they're attempting to say that, well, it's for national security. We're all going to be in a big bad problem if we don't get this done. But like was laid out in this article, it's not really necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And going on in the article here, there's a solution presented from Joel. And he's saying if the president wants to truly address the nation's food security, he would issue a food emancipation proclamation, executive order freeing America's homesteaders and small farmers from tyrannical scale prejudicial regulations. If two consenting adults want to exercise freedom of choice to engage in a voluntary food transaction, they should not need a bureaucrat's permission to do so. Unleashing neighbor-to-neighbor unregulated food commerce on the marketplace would show just how unnecessary half the corn and soybeans really are. Who will tell these farmers destroying the soil and waterways that their production is not needed, and they could do better reverting to perennial prairie polycultures growing beef? Well managed and not overgrazed, to be sure, but financially profitable and necessary to meet the shortage of red meat in America. Thousands of small farmers stand ready to serve their neighbors with food outside the industrial food oligarchy. As a small farmer, I should not need a $500,000 facility to make one chicken pot pie to sell to a fellow church member mom to feed their kids something without artificial food additives. An army of clean food entrepreneurial farmers stands ready to serve our nation with food. An army of government agents prevents them from engaging in the market. That, dear folks, is a national security problem.
If I could add just a little bit to that, so when we talked about two people who want to engage in commerce with each other freely in the free market, I put in our chat a reference to a SCOTUS case, Wickard v. Filburn, back in 1942, and basically this really expanded the Commerce Clause, and by de facto expanded the ruling power of the federal government. And usually, in terms of original intent, we think of the federal government is there to make certain standards regular across the country, but also only to get in the way or to intervene when there are differences between states, when one state has a problem with another state. But what was interesting about Wickard v. Filburn is that it basically mandated that if a farmer does not participate in a certain agricultural industry or does not cross state lines, they're still interfering with the market, with interstate commerce, and then the federal government still has the power to regulate that person. And so this was huge, because it's one thing to say, well, the government has the power, the legal power, the moral power to get in the way when someone is engaging in commerce of a certain type. Now, the Wickard v. Filburn has completely inverted that. It says, well, the government still has the power to interfere when a person doesn't engage in this. And it kind of goes into the Affordable Care Act, right, where the government can compel people to act in a certain way, even when they don't want to. And so this was a really a landmark case, and I don't mean that as a compliment. That's an indictment. That's and it's just what you've got highlighted right there. That's the key part. Declared that Filburn's wheat growing activities reduced the amount of wheat he would buy from animal feed on the open market, which is traded nationally. That right there that's the heart of the whole thing, because he's growing his own crops for his own animals. Therefore, that reduces the demand for interstate commerce, and therefore the federal government has the power to regulate what Filburn and other intrastate farmers are doing. If that's not insidious, I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's some legal wizardry going on right there.
That's right. That is legal wizardry. That's a great phrase.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit manipulating the language in a certain way. I mean, so they're saying this guy being more self-reliant in growing a little bit of a bumper crop for himself to feed his animals is going to affect the trade between the other states.
That's right.
Well, what if he didn't want to do any trade with any other states, and he's not trading with any other states? So, okay, what's the problem here? Yeah,
that's a good point. There's no counterfactual there, right?
Yeah,
they assume that because he's growing his own wheat, that if he were not growing his own wheat, they assume that, well, he would have bought it somewhere else. No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
There's no counterfactual of that.
Yeah,
and that's why I kind of drew the parallel between Wickard v. Filburn and Affordability Act, aka Obamacare. It's the federal government's ability to compel the individual to engage in a certain act that they didn't want to. And I have a huge problem with that, and I'm sure the majority audience here does too.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff, I was listening to a podcast today, and I think a lot of our a lot of our issues come from this epistemological viewpoint on things and how we're dealt language and rhetoric on on convincing us of things and looking at the root, attempting to look at the root of the issue is where you're going to find some clarity. And we've covered the epistemology. How do we know what we know?
Yep.
And I think a lot of that is confused through the language that is used and other folks' rhetoric. And it's important to be able to kind of understand some of the roots of our language. And we've talked about this in the past, so kind of like compiling a list of books and things like that would be good as like a thing to look into. Well, somebody's done that, Jay. Somebody has put in some work on kind of compiling a pretty decent book list, and they've taken and created some summaries of a lot of different books using AI and creating like kind of a short summary of those books that I learned about recently on a Union of the Unwanted episode. It's a little bit off topic what we're talking about now, but it's I wanted to go ahead and kind of mention it while it's on the top of my mind here. But it's this website here. It's the DukeReportBooks.com. And he's got like over 900 books in here on a lot of the stuff that's pertaining to what all is going on. Here's War is a Racket by General Smedley Butler. That's he's got all set up here, and he's broken this down into a synopsis. The book here, and then at the bottom there is a basically an AI kind of a summation of the book that you can listen to, in kind of like somewhat of an audio book format. So he did this for all these books that he listed on here, and I think it'd be a good resource for people to check out.
And what's the site again, please?
Duke Report Books.
Okay.
And I will grab that and make sure that gets put in the references here. But yeah, off topic a little bit, but if you want to get caught up to, doing a little bit of independent research for yourself, that this is a good resource for you.
You see on row 2, third from the left, that gray title, the fasces.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if I remember correctly, that is the etymology of fascism.
Yep.
Hence the reason why it came from Italy.
Yeah. So the fasci represents it was a Roman thing where they put these bundles of these sticks around the axe, and basically it kind of represented like a monopoly on force, or kind of like ruled by military or ruled by force.
If I remember correctly, the epigram by Mussolini was everything inside the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. And I think that was supposed to be the grand ultimate vision of the fasces, or the symbol of the bundle of sticks with the axe.
Yeah. So here's a little background on it. The fasci, a bundle of rods bound together with a projecting axe, did more than accompany Rome's magistrates. It visualized imperium, the absolute authority to command military and judicial action. Roman kings, beginning with Licinius Priscius brandished this icon as an emblem of divine sanction and civic order. The Romans did not invent this device. They inherited it from the Etruscans, whose elite tombs contain early iron models, signifying a synthesis of status and punitive potential. The physical rods, and axe bound by leather encapsulated Rome's ideological DNA, unity through force, law upheld by violence, power inscribed in ritual. So, um, an interesting thing is that the Lincoln Memorial supposedly, let's see, that Lincoln has the fasces underneath his hands. Let me see if I can pull up an image. Yeah. So check this out. So
Okay.
it looks very much like fasces. Just a little interesting tidbit there, but so anyway, that's a pretty good resource for I just ran across that today and wanted to mention it on the live stream. But
That's awesome.
But
So
yeah,
I was gonna say if we that was good deep dive there. So going out to eat, kind of trying to make this full circle. So I think that you and I have arrived at the same conclusion, even though we've got parallel paths here, that going out to eat is it's not what it used to be, and I think it's having some really deleterious effects for all of us.
Yes, and it was I'd stayed away from fast food for quite a while, and going out to eat recently on some of these trips that have you just kind of realize from having more of a homemade meal kind of situation to going out and eating food out in the restaurants is that food that you would think is high quality is not. And so I think another big factor in that is that a lot of these foods are trucked in by a limited number of companies, and they have to be trucked long distances.
Yep.
And so companies like Cisco, US Foods, Performance Food Services, Food Service, Gordon Food Service, Restaurant Depot, and a lot of times these come on reefer trucks, the refrigerated trucks, and they're frozen, and they're showing up at the restaurant, and they're cooking from a lot of these just kind of frozen foods that are packaged and distributed to all these different restaurant locations. So it's not going to be the highest quality food that you could get, for sure. So now that we're talking about like this and kind of current events that are happening with the oil prices going up and supply chains are going to be squeezed, it's not only going to be less healthy for you to eat out and go to restaurants, it's also going to be a lot more expensive, I believe, because of these issues. And these things could kind of have a domino effect. Here's a little infographic that I found from Natural News, Mike Adams, the health ranger. So you basically kind of see the cascading effects from infrastructure of oil production. It puts a squeeze on energy and all the fuel. This has knockoff effects on all the fertilizers that are used for the industrial food system. And since a lot of the distribution systems are based on just in time delivery and things like that, things could have a real domino effect on shelves at your grocery store, your local grocery store. So, and these things can happen pretty quickly as these things start to compile on themselves from, the increased energy costs having a domino effect on the entire rest of the system. And so, up here in the upper right is the solution here is more of a, thinking about becoming more of what we talk about a lot, which is becoming more self-reliant on your own energy production, your own food production, and really focusing on, that next right thing that needs to happen, which I think is, finding your local farmer, figuring out at least how to go to your local farmer's market to buy some stuff. Don't be completely dependent on the grocery stores. Support your local farmers if you're not doing it yourself. And start figuring out how you can find those resources and, possibly start doing some of your own food production yourself. Because, wars tend to expand, and these issues tend to, not get solved overnight. So, once the game starts rolling and things start getting put into action, that it might become harder and harder. Things may start to become harder and harder as time goes on. So I think it's a no better time than now. And, a lot of this stuff can seem daunting and overwhelming. And I think, Jay, you and I have been kind of thinking about this stuff for a little while and doing our best to what we can to figure out how we can set up these things so that we're being a little bit more proactive. But if somebody was just coming into this, like what kind of stuff do you think that somebody could do if they're just now like, oh man, I need to do something. What could somebody do immediately to, like, something maybe small to start figuring this out?
So I'd say two major parts is understand why do we go out to eat in the first place, I try to break it down just a few basic driving factors, and the other aspect is the most important investment that any of us we can make is invest in ourselves. In this case, it's information, education, right, knowledge, wisdom. So if we talk about why do we go out, sometimes it's for health and wellness. Like people who are vegetarians, they may want to go to a vegetarian location. That's cool. I respect that. Some people, they will say, well, it's cheaper for me to eat out than to spend the time to cook. So, okay, I respect that too. Another major factor is entertainment and social interaction. That's a huge thing. And that could be at home or eating out. So if we go out with friends and family, or just to meet new people, that's a huge difference. Taste and culture. I was pretty fortunate. I grew up part of my life in New Jersey. I've lived overseas, and I lived for 13 years in the Seattle area. And the foods there in all those places were great. Experiential and convenience versus quality. So if a person is not a good cook, they may say like, well, if I go out, I can get some really good quality food, right? Or they like the convenience of it. They like the experience of going out. So some people, they actually don't want to cook. They don't want to go out, so they get delivery, right? Or they get takeout, right? So that's fine. I think all those things are definite factors in all this, right? And it's hard to it's hard to say that there's anything right or wrong about any of this. I'm not going to look at it from that point of view. I'm just trying to identify the major factors in there. For me, the second major pillar is understanding or education, right? Really, really having good education about this. And if we can just understand that the goals, what are our goals in this, whether it be personal finance or health. And my viewpoint on a lot of these things changed when I started to move away from the concept of diet, away from the concept of nutrition, and even without trying to say, screw the environment, without making that a priority, I said, okay, first and foremost, what's my metabolic health, right? What is true health? And we're learning more and more that metabolic health is everything from the cell wall to the cell interior. And if we can make our metabolic health the best, we can make that optimal, that usually translates to optimal global health, holistic health. And that means typically for humans, for Homo sapiens, that's less chronic diseases and less autoimmune disorders. And I'm sure many people have noticed over the past 4 decades, we've had an explosion of metabolic issues, chronic diseases, and autoimmune disorders. And so those are the things I'm going to focus on in terms of my education. And the more I learn about this, the more I see that getting away from plants, because plants are trying to kill us, is the way to go. And talk about those 4 major factors that are deleterious to our effects. So those are the first 2 things I would focus on. Is why do we go out to eat? What are those major factors? And at least try to, even if you want to make a decision about them, at least identify what those factors are. And the second part is just to get educated, first and foremost. If you got those 2 things in place, a lot of other things start to come into focus for us. As an example, for me, I got a couple of extra freezers, right? Chest freezers, because when my parents and I buy a cow, we buy a whole cow. I get half, my parents get the other half, and that stuff goes in the freezer, and that's how I subsist for the majority of the year. Is my half the cow. That's a lot. That's a lot of meat, to be eating, and I probably eat well over a pound, probably close to 1.5 pounds of meat every single day, as well as the fats that we talk about, the rendered fats. So the reason I'm saying this is because that's an outcome of hopefully being better educated about these things.
Yeah, and you think that breaking down and buying a freezer, that's another added thing to my budget and
right,
all that. But if you consider, if you can eat more clean like this and your overall food expenses lowering, then you're going to pay for that.
Yep.
Plus whatever medical bills might arise from having bad health. So
yeah, and I think that's a good point. Is when we make asset costs front loaded, it seemed like a lot, but if you figure that freezers and refrigerators are durable goods, right? So typically a durable good is meant to be a multi-decade asset. That's just very boring. It's just meant to work in the background. Let's just say that the life of a chest freezer, I'm just making up my numbers, 15 years, right? And I think I paid roughly $300 for this. So we're talking about basically, what is that, $20 per year to operate? Sorry, $20 per year for the depreciated costs, the amortized cost, right? That's not bad. And then your operating costs, which is basically your electricity, that's probably $20 a year. It's not that bad. Let's just say it's 40, right? So all in, that's $60, right? Now, granted, that's just it just does one thing. It does freezing, but that allows me to buy this cow and keep it. And my all-in costs between the purchase of the cow and then the processing is $5.75 per pound. And that is high quality hamburger. It's the fats, the liver, heart. It's all the beef. It's all the porterhouse, T-bones, chuck roast steak, ribeye, filet mignon. Right, $5.75 a pound. That's You can barely get that for ground beef at Walmart. And by the way, I like Walmart. Their beef is fine. I have no problems with it. But you cannot get ribeye for $5.75 a pound.
Yeah.
That's impossible. You're gonna pay almost 5 times that.
Yeah, that was something that really opened my eyes on buying, the whole cow, is that when you break it down into all the individual cuts, when you consider the price per pound for some of these cuts, when you go for the whole cow, then it ends up being a really great deal, because you're not paying these high prices for some of the premium cuts that you get at the grocery store. So
that's right.
So yeah, I think it's well worth the investment to get yourself I know for myself, doing the whole cow, it takes I think it's a 16 cubic foot chest freezer for a whole cow, and then you can do probably an 8 cubic foot for like a half. And it's a minimal. I would say it's a minimal investment for being able to have that. And then, like you said, the chest freezers, they're not using a ton of energy. They're a lot more efficient than your standard refrigerators.
Yeah, and another, just a small point, but I think it makes a difference, is when you use the vertical freezers, when you open those up, that air comes rushing out.
Yep.
From the bottom, and it's not a huge thing, but over 20 years it adds up. Versus a chest freezer, that air is always trying to stay low, so it stays in the chest freezer. Now that's an advantage. An obvious disadvantage is, you got to dig through this thing, pull stuff out. So if one can kind of think ahead of time, well, I know I'm gonna want these ingredients, later on, then they can layer the freezer in such a way that they're always getting consistent things. So we don't put all the ribeyes at the top, or we don't put all the ribeyes at the bottom, right? We kind of randomize it just a little bit, so that way I get ribeyes at the top, ribeyes at the middle, ribeyes at the bottom. So just a little bit of planning makes a big difference. To go between $25 a pound versus $5.75 a pound, I'll take the extra time, because I only have to do it one time per year. So that's a huge difference. And then the ability to do the work. So like I said, I render my own fats, and that goes into my cooking. I purchased a decent amount, and also getting the talk about assets that you own, 1 gallon jars, right? Glass jars. I use that for keeping the saturated animal fats. That makes a difference. So when we buy these things, these are assets that we own. Technically, yes, they do depreciate over time, but we're talking about 15, 20, 25 years, especially if we take care of them. Right? So these sorts of things make a big difference. And I don't mean to take away from the experience and the joy of going out to eat. I love to go out to eat, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I do. Me too. And it's nice to gather with friends or family. And I know in our family, with siblings, that my siblings, a lot of times it's not about kind of coming to Sunday dinner at the folks' place, but they want to have, like you said, the experience of going out and being out and going somewhere to eat, and doing that together as a family for celebrations and things like that. So that I think it's better to if you're kind of caught in this, like, I'm going out to eat like all the time, where's all my money going? That's one thing that you could cut back on, especially as times maybe getting a little bit more difficult here, especially with all the fuel prices and everything. And may actually end up benefiting you if you kind of adopt that, if you start to adopt that change in lifestyle. Save money, get healthier, and source more of your food locally, folks, because that's the only way that you're probably going to get fed. If you're not growing it yourself, then you're gonna need to be finding local farmers that can help keep your folks fed.
Yeah. So, we bought our cow a year and a half ago from John, right? John Tejan. And then this past season, we bought from Flint River Farms, back in late November. That was great. And the Flint River Farms is less than 10 minutes away from where we live. So
Yeah.
that's pretty local. A cattleman, literally a cattle farm. So it was kind of cool. We just kind of lucked on it.
Yeah, have you established a relationship, gone to their farm and got to
We did.
hang out
So
with
it's
them a
kind of
little
cool. I asked the owner, I said, can we stop by when you're calling the herd? Can we stop by and see what that looks like? He said, yeah, sure, come on by. So he had him and his operations manager. They were there and they answered all of our questions. It was great. Got to see how they pull a few, then they get them directed in a line, and then they weigh each cow. And it was great. The one that we got was 55 pounds. That was a big cow. That was a big girl. And it was neat just to see the whole process. So, it's not necessary, but my parents and I were intellectually curious people, and it was just something totally different that none of us had been involved with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So I think that the other thing that's so we talk about the factors for why do we go out to eat, right? Education, right? Understanding it, and really having a good understanding of metacognition, like thinking about thinking, right? And what are the when we talk about the scientific method, right? When we talk about philosophy, metaphysics, logic, right? What are the metaphysical standards that we're using to arrive at certain conclusions? Is this good for us? Is it not good for us? Is it bad for us? That sort of thing. And I think that we can apply that to diet and exercise and nutrition and metabolic health. And from what I've seen, plants are bad for us, right? So that's part of my education pillar. Then there's the other aspects of this, taking all this, getting all the converge. And, what I started asking myself is the starting questions, what do I want in life, right? So you made a good point, Greg, which is very important because part of our lives. It's how we freeze our work is money, right? People are cool with spending money on going out to eat. I'm totally cool with that. No more judgments whatsoever. But that means that's just less money that they have in their pockets. So it gets into personal finance. Time, right? So some people may say, well, I'm saving time by eating out. Are you? Are you saving time? Because sometimes they have to go out, eat, and then come back, right? So that takes up a lot of time. And if they're spending the money, that means they got to work more to recover the money. There's health and wellness. So I was just talking about health and wellness before, metabolic health. And then another aspect is simplicity. So having gone carnivore, from my point of view, my cooking has gotten a lot simpler. I need a lot fewer ingredients, but the few ingredients that I need, I can leverage them greatly, right? So the different animal fats that I use, I leverage those greatly. I use Redmond real salt, which is salt with minerals in it, right? Or Himalayan salt, which is fine. I leverage that a good deal. The equipment that I use, so I have a portable grill or broiler I leave in the garage. I probably use that, I'd say 4 out of 5 days, right? So that is an asset I'm using all the time. High leverage. The chest freezers, highly leveraged, right? Those help me save a lot of money. So, are these important things to you? Time, money, health and wellness, simplicity, right? The ability to leverage your time at home, leverage the assets and the supplies that you use. These are all important. And something that I think you pointed out, Greg, which I think was really spot on, and I'm trying to encapsulate it, is eating out still as good as it used to be? And when you brought that chart of or the search engine query which was the who are the main providers of ingredients, right, for the large restaurants.
Yeah.
Even the small restaurants, right? They've really penetrated, and this is why we're seeing sometimes not a lot of differentiation between these restaurants. Why? Because they're going to the exact same vendors, right? And a
Right.
good example of this, and this is not meant to be political, is Cracker Barrel. Cracker Barrel a few years ago had great food. They cooked everything with scratch, right? They cooked everything. They just got the raw ingredients and did everything in their own kitchens, and it has changed a lot. And it really concerns me that the quality of the food has gone down. I think Cracker Barrel's attendance has gone down quite a bit, and we don't get that great experience. And part of it is because these highly engineered, highly ultra processed foods, and it just kind of tastes bland. It doesn't have the pop and the zing of what I love. I love country cooking. We just you don't get it at Cracker Barrel anymore. And I'm not trying to pick on Cracker Barrel specifically. There are plenty of other places like that, but I think that's it's not as good as it used to be.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing a story about how they were moving away from creating the biscuits and cooking them every day to now doing the frozen biscuits and warming them up and stuff
That's right.
like that, pre-made stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that anytime you freeze something and then you have to unfreeze it and go through all that process, it's definitely gonna have a different taste and not be as probably. I remember, yeah, those biscuits and the stuff they would serve would be really fluffy and crisp and really good like that. But you get a biscuit that's not made like that, and you can definitely tell.
I remember seeing a video just literally within the past 6 months. They show people going to Cracker Barrel, and they got the biscuit and they're tapping on the plate, and it sounded like a hockey puck. That's kind of sad. I mean, Cracker Barrel, their food used to be great, and like you said, the biscuits. Oh my gosh, the buttermilk biscuits. It was that perfect mix of crispy on the outside and silky soft on the inside, and they really knocked it out of the park. And it just kind of saddens me. And I'm not blaming the company necessarily. It sounds as if they're getting squeezed on both ends by customers who want lower costs and vendors who are raising the prices for whatever reason. So I get it.
I guess there was some kind of just did a quick search on that, and it says, I guess due to backlash on that, it looks like they went back to making them more from scratch.
It's good.
Return to making biscuits from scratch. I don't know. As of September 2025, they say they officially announced they are all rolled by hand and baked fresh throughout the day. But so people, I guess, got tired of them not making them from scratch biscuits.
Something else. Again, I'm not trying to pick on Cracker Barrel, but it shows that when a company is no longer in alignment with what their customers want, it really hurts the business. They started adding alcohol to their menu, and their restaurant or their kitchens have a limited footprint. So if they add in alcohol, they had to take away something else, and they took away a lot of the scratch ingredients, that would normally happen, and that makes a difference. And people notice the difference in the quality there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just more and more if you're out there looking around, and if you're noticing that too, the prices of going out to eat. I was recently in Franklin, Tennessee, going to a concert with my buddy, and we went out to eat at a restaurant there, and buying a meal there was like, I don't know, it was like pretty expensive. It was like
Yeah,
$30 to have a meal.
yeah,
And so, um, be it was in kind of what, like a lot of stuff in Franklin is pretty kind of fancy, kind of
yep,
fancy area.
yep.
And they have this place called the Factory there, which is like they brought in all these like kind of boutique stores and restaurants and stuff, and uh, it's kind of a hoity-toity place, but it's like that all over. But even at like the fast food restaurants have gotten pretty expensive for buying a meal there. So, um, just another nail in the restaurant coffin. Especially if you're trying to figure out ways on how you can use your money more wisely now.
Yeah.
And like you said, try to figure out some way to build some kind of assets, things that you can rely on in the future, and reduce your overall expenditures and simplify your life, right? Like, exactly like you said. So figure out how, you know, maybe not necessarily, home cooking is, an added task that you have to do. Uh, but, uh, but if you can like pre-prepare some meals, or even do, fasting periodically,
Yeah.
which has been beneficial, that I've found, is going to help your overall health.
With that, I think that it's, I guess, incumbent upon us to help the audience with solutions and alternatives. And, batch cooking has really gained a lot of popularity in the past 10, 15 years. And I think this is more than it's just leftovers, right? This is actually taking, a part of one day, Saturday or Sunday, and going ahead and doing large quantities. One thing that's been popular over the past 10, 15 years is the Instapot, right? And that's been great. And I think that's a great invention. They help a lot of people with saving a lot of money. They're doing a lot of batch cooking with that. So I would encourage anyone to consider doing that. With the obvious other side of this is that, yeah, there is a lot of redundancy, Monday through Friday, or maybe Monday through Saturday. But if it's something like breakfast, do you really need that much variety? Or let me rephrase that. Are people looking for that much variety for breakfast? You know, Probably not. I think most people are pretty cool with ham and eggs or sausage and eggs, things like that. They're perfectly fine with that. So just doing that, getting something done ahead of time. I do a lot of frittatas, right? And I'll do a lot of that ahead of time, and that for me that works out really well. Being able to do that, and I just pull out what I need for the morning, nuke it, and I'm good. Or one can toast it or put it in the oven. That works out pretty well. So, and then on top of that, whatever a person needs, they can also refreeze it, once it's been cooked. So little things like that can make a big difference, and that is a huge difference in it's a time saver, huge time saver, right, and a money saver.
Now, do you do what's your kind of eating habits like? Do you do more of like a one meal a day type system, or are you eating periodically throughout the day and things like that?
Typically 2 to 3 times a day. I know a lot of people do OMAD, one meal a day. If they're good with it, cool. I have no problem with it. I know I get hungry. And you can probably tell I'm a pretty slender guy, so it's hard for me to keep on the weight. If I'm not eating, I'm losing the weight, unfortunately. And I really do I feel hungry, right? So most time, if I'm eating, it's because I'm actually hungry. That's just me. I From what I've seen from the different medical doctors who promote carnivore, one thing I've noticed that they're pretty consistent from doctor to doctor is eat when you're hungry, no more, no less, right? If you're hungry, eat. If you're not hungry, don't eat.
Yeah.
And I think that they've pointed out that we've gotten into this grazing, snacking, culture, this mentality, and it can really screw up our digestive system, or I should say our health. And I didn't understand. I just kind of looked at the digestive system as just this tube, right? And just stuff goes in, stuff comes out. And I didn't understand there's a lot of more complexity to it, and that we need time for that food to move through the stomach acid to digest it right well, and then to move through. And if we're just grazing, we're never giving the digestive system time to build up the acidity, digest that food, and move it through. And what we ought to be doing is eating when we have not had any fluid for 1 or 2 hours. So the acidity is definitely there. It breaks down the food. It goes through. Wait an hour or two, and then drink water, right? And I think that makes a big difference. So hence that almost by definition precludes snacking or grazing, And so once I understood this, that was a major change in the way that I eat. So I really do try to really have well-defined, 2, maybe 3 meals a day. And yeah, that's been a big change. Again, it was about education.
Yeah, experiment on yourself too. I'll give you a little anecdote from my experience doing. I did the 1 meal a day for a while, and I think I'm more on the page of eating when you're hungry, like you were talking about now, because I found myself like being really, really hungry at the end of the day and not feeling satisfied at that 1 meal that I had at the end of the day. And then like wanting to do what you're talking about, going graze after that, because I didn't feel completely satiated.
Yeah.
And so I think, breaking it up into some other meals throughout the course of the day when you're hungry, and making it, good high quality food,
Mm-hmm.
and being satiated. And then I also found that another way to avoid the whole grazing thing is to keep yourself busy with some stuff.
Yeah, that's a great solution. Yeah.
If you're sitting there and you're idle, and I think a lot of times maybe we'll eat just because we're just bored and lacking of some kind of mental stimulation or something that's keeping us active and doing things. Because I think once you go into that mode, you're just like, well, just feel like maybe I'll just eat a little bit here.
Right.
Primarily because you're bored, and you're looking for something to do or feel a little better or whatever. So if you keep yourself active, you got a lot of activity and projects that you might be working on, stuff like that. I think that kind of takes away the thoughts of grazing and doing all that kind of stuff, eating extraneously.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point you're making. Is it's the attitude that we have, right? That we adopt, and that can translate into physiological differences and changes, right? So, just by doing that, we're helping the body kind of, I don't want to say cleanse, I don't want to use that word, but moving that material through the digestive system, getting it to the blood, right, as needed. And we're working with the body. We're not working against it when we do that. And I think that's another major change in attitude. And, I know that was kind of promoted for a few years, the whole concept of eating 6 times a day. You should just graze. It's like, well, if you do that, and we're drinking water or some sort of fluid, we're never giving our stomachs the ability to get to the necessary level of acidity of about 1.5 pH. Well, we're working against the body when we do that. And whether we say we're built that way or we evolved that way, adapted that way, whatever it is, look at humans from many, many, many years ago. They didn't have the capability of grazing, right? Grazing was a great thing. And as humans, what did we eat? We ate megafauna, right? The large animals, right? The bovine, the ovine, the woolly mammoths, right? Or the large African game, right? Where you could get a hunting party together, and they'd have a huge kill, a huge feast, and they would eat till satiation. And that's it. They didn't need to eat anymore, right? And one meal a day for many of them worked really, really well.
Yep. To highlight a little bit more on what we're talking about with the whole restaurant food quality, I have a video that I pulled up from Dr. Sten Ekberg talking about the reasons why a lot of the restaurant food quality is lower, and figured I'd play a little bit of this, and then we could talk about it for a minute.
Is to your health, to your energy, your weight, and your long-term risk of disease. Maybe you've already cleaned up your diet and your calories, as if that
like
was
I'm getting the audio coming through on
the
that
most. And it's really both ironic.
Let me stop sharing that for a second and see if I can pull it back up and get some audio off of that.
And sad that when people go out to eat, it should be a treat. Very often people go out.
Still no audio.
I was hearing it.
You were hearing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Celebrate something, but instead you expose yourself to something that is so much lower in quality than what you normally eat. And it's really sad because restaurants, their business is food. They should know food, but when it comes to the quality of ingredients, that you may have learned about the importance of high quality foods like grass-fed food, like organic, wild caught fish, pasture-raised eggs, pasture-raised chicken, animals that have lived a normal life and eaten food that their species are supposed to normally eat. That makes for a healthy animal, that makes for healthy food. Are they going to serve you butter? Are they going to give you extra virgin olive oil? Well, sadly, when you go out to a restaurant, you're not going to get any of these. There may be some niche restaurants on the fringe that's expensive that gives you some of that. But for the most part, you're not going to find it. Instead, what you're getting is very often hidden sugars. You're getting a bunch of white flours. They're serving bread with everything. And you're getting soybean oil, canola oil, and corn oil in everything they cook. And not only that, but very often they'll be using some flavors in sauces or spice mixes that contain chemicals. And if you ask the people in the restaurant what's in those sauces, they have absolutely no idea. So I know I'm painting a bleak picture here, but don't worry. You just have to realize that when you go out, you're not going to have perfection. Even if you're striving for it in the food you cook at home, you're just going to have to let go of it temporarily. It's not going to kill you, and you just have to make the best of it. But we do have to realize is that the more you deviate away from the good foods that you normally eat, then it's going to lead to more damage, and you're going to feel worse, and it's going to be harder to recover from it. So anytime that you have a break in your routine, it is going to be challenging. But the key is that you use some of the information we're going to talk about in this video, and you create some guidelines for yourself, and then you stick to those guidelines. And if you do that, then you can probably come away from that trip or from business travel or whatever it is with minimal or even no damage at all. But the most important thing is that you don't go into a free fall, that you don't give in to a little bit of temptation and you have that dessert and one thing leads to another, and then you have a couple of mixed drinks, and then you have ice cream on top of that, and you figure that, hey, you know, I blew it, so there's no point in even worrying about it. That is something that you don't want to do. You set up some guidelines and you stick to them, and then when you get back home, you're going to feel that it's worth it. So here's some things to think about when you order. You start off with the protein, the meat, the fish, etc. and just try to pick whatever is the best available on the menu. And here you focus on steak, fish, eggs, chicken, or whatever else is available. And I know I talk a lot about grass-fed and wild-caught and so forth, but here's what you have to realize. All meat, including the ones that are super high in omega-6 and they're grain-fed and they're conventional, all that, they're still vastly superior to eating sugars and chemicals and starches and fried food and ultra-processed foods, okay? So there's going to be your foundation, even if it's not the quality you're used to. And when you order, you want to ask, how did they prepare it? Because that's important. There's a huge difference between if they grilled it or baked it, which is relatively healthy, or if they sauteed it, because they're going to use all those seed oils, or if they fried it in those seed oils. And then when you order, you try to convince them to replace your fries, your rice, and your bread with some extra vegetables, some non-starchy vegetables like beans and broccoli and cauliflower and carrots if they have those, and also side salads. And right away when you sit down, here's the hard part, because once you order, you're going to be hungry, you sit down and they're going to come in and they're going to offer you that bread basket. And you have to be firm, and right away you say no, you don't need a bread basket. And then when you get your side salad to start off with, you want to avoid sugary dressings and things with a lot of chemicals in it. And those would typically be vinaigrettes, have a lot of sugar. Thousand Islands have a lot of sugar. And ranch is one of the worst chemical concoctions there is. It's just totally loaded with MSG for one thing. And slightly better than those dressings would be blue cheese or Caesar, because they're typically very low in sugar. However, you will get some of the seed oils in there, but we also have to keep in mind that the things that you do once in a while is not going to be too terribly bad. But even better, with your salad, you ask for olive oil and vinegar or lemon juice, and you add some salt and pepper. And if you were to end up at a barbecue place, for example, they're going to serve you some barbecue sauces. Or if you're in a restaurant that might have like a Japanese, they might have teriyaki. And these sauces could have like 25-30% sugar in them. So you don't want to just drown your stuff in these sauces. What you can do is ask for a straight hot sauce or a sriracha or something that doesn't have any sugar or minimal sugar. Because even if you use, sriracha has like a gram of sugar, but you're not going to use very much of it. So wouldn't worry about that. Or you can ask if they have a very spicy barbecue sauce, because then you could use just a tiny amount of that and still get a lot of flavor without so much sugar. So let's talk about the types of cuisine. What are the places?
All right. Yeah, I don't know if I guess the audio is coming through on your end, but I wasn't hearing the audio from that. But kind of giving you a little bit of a rundown on.
I really like that. I don't agree with everything you said, but I think the overall theme is really good. I really appreciate what you're saying. Stay away from the ultra processed foods. Stay away from the engineered foods. Stay away from carbohydrates. I think that's really important. Stay away from seed oils. And I really appreciate the fact that he identified very specific foods, like the ranches. They are typically very high, especially, and also Thousand Island. They're typically very high in seed oils, right? Very high in carbohydrates. So kudos to him. I really appreciate that video, or at least what we saw.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're going to eat out, there's a little bit of information in there about how you can ask, and like you were saying during one of those parts, that any of the meats are, even if they're fed with grains, they're going to be better than a better source than anything that's fried or processed.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you something, and this is an open-ended question. We've seen probably over the past basically 3 decades the rise of the vegan vegetarian restaurants, which is fine. If someone's trying to eat to be healthy, fine. I get it. Have you ever encountered a carnivore restaurant?
I don't think I've run across one that's like primarily just carnivore specific. No.
Yeah, neither have I.
Other than Brazilian steakhouses.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Exactly. Right.
Yep.
And it's interesting. They have a good strategy where they got the salad bar, and the servers will always point the people to the salad bar first. They're trying to get them filled up on that, and then they do the rest. And
nah, man, just keep bringing the endless meats.
Oh yeah. If I go with friends, and usually that's what I do is I go with friends. I said, look, you want to go to the salad bar, that's fine, but get the smallest possible plate you can, and only do one trip, because it's so easy to fill up, and you want to be here for the meats. That is totally in agreement with you.
You do reach a point where you're like, okay, I gotta call it, dude, because yeah, you can only fill your belly with so much protein there from the meats.
A bloated tick coming out of there.
Yeah, the sweats start kicking in, and you're like, oh well, I guess I gotta end it here.
Anytime I visited Brazil, I always made sure to go to the Rodízio de Carne, and forget about it. And you could pay $40, $45, $50 to do Rodizio here in the United States. Man, I was probably talking about like $10 whenever I would visit Brazil. It was awesome.
Oh, it's a similar kind of setup where you go in and
that's where it originated. It originated in Brazil and Argentina.
Oh yeah, they have a lot of beef down there. They raise a lot of beef.
Yeah, exactly. So it was great, and it's funny because I don't like chicken organs. I don't like chicken gizzards. I don't like chicken hearts or anything like that. But there was this girl I was seeing down there, and so we went to one of these Rodízio de Carne, and one of those places, and she insisted that I have chicken hearts. I'm like, ugh, that's disgusting. She's like, no, she insisted I had to have, like, oh, fine. Just to get her shut up, I tried it. It was delicious. Like, I don't like chicken heart texture. I don't like chicken heart flavor. This was really good. It was not chewy. It didn't have that tinny taste to it. It's really, really good. So if I go to a Brazilian steakhouse or Brazilian place and they have chicken hearts, I will eat it. That's the only time I'll eat chicken hearts.
Mm. Well, thanks for the comment there. Hey, Alabama. This has been a great show. Have you taken any of this over to your pets and feeding them better? So not me personally, but I have some friends that they've started raising rabbits, and they've been feeding the rabbits to their dogs specifically, and then feeding. I have some other friends that they've been giving their dogs a lot of the eggs from their chickens and feeding them those. So yeah, not me specifically, but I know some friends that are doing that, and they're attempted to get their animals on some better foods and stuff like that. And also keeping their animals away from vaccines as well. And if you go down the rabbit hole of vaccines, that's a whole rabbit hole to go down in and of itself.
Yeah. So I have a cat now, Wilford Brimley Jr., and he was raised on kibble. And so he's old. He's probably about 20 years old now, and he's kind of flavor locked. He will only eat kibble. And we probably all have heard that once an animal gets older, it's really difficult for them to change to something else. So the modern day kibble is just horrible for animals, canines and felines. And we're seeing greater and greater evidence that the lifetimes, I should say, of these domesticated animals, dogs and cats, they're about half of what they used to be 100, 150, 200 years ago. We have multiple independent sources saying that, a lot of these canines, they were living 25, 30, 35 years. Well, now, if a dog was to be 17 years old, oh my gosh, that's old, and it wasn't like that. And I think a lot of that has to do with the nutrition, and my point with this is, if I were to get a kitten or a puppy or something like that, from day one, as quickly as I could, I would try to get it onto animal product as quickly as possible. Why? Because they're hypercarnivores as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey, Alabama, if I find I can't eat the organs the traditional ways, I just fry mine in butter.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because this is a really good topic. So uh, it is possible if we eat too much liver, it is possible to get a condition called hypervitaminosis. And Dr. Ken Berry and Dr. Sean Baker and Dr. Anthony Chafee have talked about hypervitaminosis. It's basically an excess of vitamins from liver, cow liver. And so, I think the best perspective I heard about this was from Dr. Chafee, and he said, if we take a look at proportionality of, if you have a bison or a cow, right, and let's say the liver on a cow is this big, right, and we take that in proportion of the body, we're talking about just a few grams of liver per 1 pound of beef, right? So, from an adaptation point of view, we really don't need that much liver per pound of beef. So we don't need to get a lot, and it is actually easy to get too much. I can't stand the taste of pretty much any kind of liver at all, even if it is served on a plate of fava beans and a nice Chianti. I don't like it. But what I will do, I have a freeze dryer, and I freeze dry liver. I put it in the food processor to powder it, and then I have one of those manual machines that I can use to load up the powdered freeze-dried liver, and I use triple aught gel capsules and make my own. And each one of those holds 900 milligrams, I think it is, of dried beef liver. So I do 6 of those a day. That's 5,400 milligrams. So I don't have to taste it. So for me, that works out really well. So yeah, that's my way of getting that. And there's a ton of really good vitamins you get in liver that's probably not easy to get through other means.
Oh yeah, that's pretty sweet. Yeah, helps having the freeze dryer there. So apparently your dog can get liver problems from too much liver.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
I didn't know about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, hypervitaminosis. It is a real issue. Probably too much copper, too much iron, too much selenium, right? And there's a whole host of other enzymes that come along with that as well. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just a matter of genetics. Like, people really like the taste of liver. I just can't stand it. I don't care how you cook it. It's not happening for me. But whatever.
Yep. Yeah, but good way of getting some extra vitamins and stuff if you can take it, if you can get some of it to save some of the organ meats.
Yeah. And I think this is, I think that, what Hey Alabama's asking, these are good questions. These are pertinent questions. And we're kind of like, we're all we here on this side of the discussion, talking about how do we optimize health. And I think that's where we should be. Then there's the other side is, the people who are the vegans and vegetarians, and they're not getting essential nutrients. And when I use essential, I'm trying to use it in the physiological definition of the word, which is nutrients which are necessary for critical physiological functions, but ones we cannot make. So there are certain proteins that we can make inside the body, which are necessary for certain functions, physiological functions. Those are not essential. The ones that are essential are the 20 to 24 essential amino acids, right, that we cannot make, so we have to consume them. And there are quite a few of these that are essential nutrients: D3, K2, some vitamin E, some retinol, carnosine, carnitine, B12. And it just concerns me that we have so many people who are vegans, vegetarians, And by definition, they cannot get these essential nutrients, and they're literally starving themselves to death. You know, and that I found that to be a concern. There's a friend of mine. Now, I'm not going to say who the person is, but this person is a staunch vegetarian, and this person is. I think this person's health is going down because of it.
You ever see the folks that say that they got their animal on a vegetarian diet and then they put like the meat versus
yeah,
and they go to the meat every time? Yeah,
those are awesome.
That's funny. Well, cool. Staying away from the vaxes on your animals there. That's good. I think that's good. And then so I have another video here, just kind of showing you what, you know, is possible. Like this isn't, you know, way out of the spectrum of reality. Here is a video from Ann of All Trades on a family that has just an eighth of an acre garden and has a family of 6. So I'll play a little bit of this and talk about it here in a minute.
Where they grow an entire year's worth of food for a family of 6. Tell us how these 10 raised beds and a couple yard plots actually feed your family.
Sure. Right here, we had carrots. We just dug like 120 pounds of carrots off of this piece.
120 pounds of carrots came from just this little strip right here?
From like half of this garden right here.
Amazing.
So over here in this strip, then the other half of the garden, I grew onions, and those are already cured and stored down in our cold room.
Yes. That's wild.
Absolutely.
We're going to look at their storage system for their main crops in just a little while, so stay tuned, because that actually is the thing that made me find out about you, is wondering how the heck you kept up with it, first of all.
Right.
That you grew that much food on such a small area, but then most importantly, how you kept it from rotting. Because like in 13 years of gardening, I found every wrong way to store carrots and potatoes and onions and all those things. So we'll talk about that.
Yes.
How many pounds of potatoes did you pick from this area?
Like 200 pounds of potatoes from here. So from starting right here.
Oh, this little.
All the way
horseshoe.
Over and then around there.
Okay. But
So
200
like
pounds of potatoes is a lot, and you can keep your potatoes from rotting.
Yes, by curing them well. That's the secret, is curing them.
Okay.
And then storing them in a room that has the proper temperature and humidity.
Again, subtle foreshadowing to the next part of our tour, but this is amazing. And so what was in here?
So this whole part was sweet corn. I did make a mistake this year. So this all was sweet corn up to like here. And so then it shaded this side of my tomatoes.
Oh.
But that's okay. They're still doing great. So
yeah. Also, I want to bring a self-guided tour, this self-guided tour of your house over to see your corn really quick, because you did your corn right. Unlike some of us, their corn is planted in a square.
In a plot, yes.
Which I was told this year, after 13 years of gardening in rows, by an old timer, that the reason that my corn isn't as good as it could possibly be is because corn pollinates in a square, not in a line. Yeah. The more you know. Every year is a new lesson.
Yes. Well, and also it's nice to have it in a plot because it's not as likely to get blown over. So,
or knocked over by my donkeys and dogs.
I used to just do like, so like 2 long rows.
Yeah.
And it always got knocked over every single year.
Oh.
And I was like, why aren't all the cornfields getting knocked over? And I was like, oh yeah, because they're in a plot. Yeah. So this is dent corn.
So just kind of highlighting a little bit, of what you could do on a small amount of a small plot there in, specifically, there's a lot of staples I know that of stuff that I eat that's and it looks like my camera froze up, but like onions, put onions in tons of things and stuff like that. So I think the big thing is like grow what you will eat, and then any excesses that you have, if you're raising animals and stuff, it can go to your animals like chickens. They'll eat any of your scraps and stuff, any overabundance of the stuff that you're growing. So
yeah.
So yeah, hey Alabama, you got some good recommendations there. Billy Bond teaches you how to feed your animals for free or close to it and put them in the freezer. He's a really good channel. Matt Powers teaches how to make your ground healthy without tilling and using fertilizers. Yep, that's a good channel too. Danny King at Deep South Homestead at Pecan Grove, Deep South Homestead. Still up, grows a lot of food, but uses conventional fertilizers. So, yeah, there's a lot in the whole growing of your own food, and I think primarily one of the things you got to do is focus on the soil.
Yeah.
And getting that all figured out and getting your soil microorganisms figured out. And I think there's a lot of benefit to not going into the doing the no-till method of gardening, seeing a lot of good benefits out of that with some personal gardening efforts, because you're not disturbing some of the soil microorganisms that you've established, which really bring the proper nutrients to the plants. So I think it's all about the soil food web and establishing that in the soil. And getting good soil is difficult to do, and it requires a lot of composting and building that soil up over time. So it's a multi-year effort for sure on building.
You know what makes the absolute best topsoil?
What?
Herds of bison.
Yeah. Yep.
And we have multiple stories from multiple sources that as settlers were moving west, they were finding places where the topsoil was 9, 10, 11 feet deep. And it's just some of the most fertile around. And because the bison had been there for thousands and thousands of years, and because of their activity, and they are mobile fermentation vats, and they make some of the best fertilizer for thousands and thousands of years. They had just created this amazing topsoil, and didn't need active effort. It was purely passive effort.
Yeah. That a really good documentary on that is Roots So Deep You Can See the Devil Down There. And it really goes into the benefits of doing the amp grazing method or the rotational grazing method for moving your livestock, the cattle across pastures instead of the continuous grazing method to do kind of like mob grazing and mimicking those patterns of, like you said, the bison moving across the prairies. And, as they're traveling, they're manuring and urinating, and that's helping bring stuff into the soil that will help fertilize it. And also a bunch of other little stuff going on that's really helping to build deep topsoil.
If you ever get a chance to read, this is for the audience, is a book recommendation, The Vegetarian Myth or The Vegan Myth. I forget. It was by Lee R. Keith, and she talks about exactly what you mentioned, that cows and buffalo and bison, their activity does all that. Even when they step into the ground and their hooves leave a small imprint, small trace, that creates a micro habitat for microbes just in that immediate area. And when we look at it from a distance, pasture land may look smooth, but when we get up close, it's actually imprinted. And just the way that the water collects in that little area can make a big difference, a positive difference in there. So just those little things have huge impacts in creating really good quality soil.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, that's the basis of all our biological life, really, is healthy soils. What was the name of that book that you mentioned there?
I want to say it's either the vegetarian myth or the vegan myth. Look it up pretty easily. Yeah.
See if we can pull it up real quick.
Yep. Yeah.
This book right here, I guess.
Yep, that's it. That's it. So, Keith does a great job of showing how vegetarianism, veganism is bad on so many facets, from economics, our health, national security. It's bad for the planet. It actually promotes crude oil consumption, because we've transformed our soil from something that provides nutrients to merely a growing medium. And the only way that we can provide the nutrients now for our plants is through fertilizer, and a very high percentage of our fertilizer comes from using crude oil, as the source for the carbon. And that's a huge problem, and if for anyone who cares about getting off of fossil fuels, and I'm not one of those people, but if that's part of someone's agenda, is getting off of fossil fuels, then we would think that would be something very important, and that's just something that's not being considered. So that just kind of concerns me. So I think that Lear Keith has done a great job of identifying so many of these different facets and showing that vegetarianism, veganism is so bad for us in many different ways. And Lear Keith was a vegan, I think, for 20 years, and her health was on such a decline, and she was doing all the right things, if you will, of trying to have to avoid any of the animal products, having the variety of different plants that she was eating, all the time. And she was running into so many chronic issues. And I think that it was so bad that she acknowledged she just permanently damaged her body because of this. She's still facing some of these issues, but they were greatly ameliorated by getting off the vegan and vegetarian diet and incorporating animal products into her diet. So that's just so important. One of the things that I think is really important is the idea of monocropping. When we have these huge swaths across the planet that are dedicated to monocropping, that is almost the epitome of anti-environmentalism, if you will. And we're forcing huge parts of the planet to be dedicated just to one crop, and that is the antithesis of a healthy ecology, right? Because that huge swath of land is put in for one particular purpose. It cannot get a variety of different nutrients, and it cannot get a variety of different life cycles or cycles from different life forms. And then when it's harvested all at once, and then the soil is stripped away completely. And I think that's a huge problem that most people just don't understand. And what goes along with that are the death of literally trillions of life forms, especially animals, that happen with that, right? So talk about the glyphosates, right, that are used to kill different life forms. So we have the herbicides, we have the fungicides, and we have the pesticides, right, that are used, and they're just sprayed out there. And we don't have these problems when we have a diverse ecology, if you will. And so if we take a look at just in the United States, in North America, where we had these large plains of bison, not buffalo, but bison, they didn't have these problems. Why? Because the bison had these really intense feeding cycles. They took the plants down to a certain height, and those plants thrived on those intense feeding cycles. The bison moved on, those plants grew up again, and they had all this fertilizer left over from these traveling factories, natural fermentation vats called bison, where they left manure, they left urine, they left microhabitats from their hooves. And this was so important, and that caused such a healthy, vibrant ecology. And we have stripped that away for rice and beans and corn and monoculture products such as cabbages and Brussels sprouts. And I think Lee Keith did a great job of highlighting all that.
I would agree, and it kind of comes back to the article in the beginning there from Joel Salatin about how if you took a lot of these large farms and you set aside some of that to just raise the beef and to do it the regenerative way, and those cows will process the plants and the grasses and stuff on that area and help build the soil. And you could cut out a lot of this stuff, which is a lot of it we don't need or we shouldn't be eating, be consuming. And then you could kind of replace some of these large scale industrial monocropping facilities with maybe some other types of regenerative farming, and still be able to feed people.
Yep.
And build the soils back up.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just was talking to my coworker about that this week, and he would travel a lot for his previous job and said that you can go out into, a lot of the fields, and it's as soon as it rains, it just turns into goop, and there's no structure in the soil.
That's right.
And a lot of that stuff gets is run off on a lot of the industrial scale farms and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think it's really probably, I come to a realization that, there is a alternative. There's alternatives out there, and those might start showing themselves to be a lot more economically feasible, specifically when we're having, a kind of an energy could be on the verge of an energy crisis. So.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's a good point is, this becomes a national security issue by making us more dependent upon, global crude, right? Where, in my humble opinion, as far as what I've seen, the United States could be pretty much energy independent. But we're consuming so much fertilizer that comes from crude that has to do with global demand. And that's funding some states that are pro-terrorist states. That's a national security issue, not being energy independent and funding countries that hate us. I have a problem with that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's really important to figure out if you can do something locally to do it, and quit intentionally poisoning yourself with some of these things, and start moving in a more positive direction.
Yeah, There's another book. I'm going to put this in our private chat called Toxic Superfoods by Sally K. Norton. Toxic Superfoods, How Oxalate Overload is Making You Sick and How to Get Better. I had no idea how bad oxalates were for us until I read this book. I'd heard about this. I heard a little bit about, this bad for us, but she went into great detail about this. And there's 3 basic categories. There's oxalic acids, oxalate salts, and oxalate crystals. And all of them are bad for us for a variety of different reasons. Maybe we can focus on that one day. But I just want to give these 2 books is The Vegetarian Myth and Toxic Superfoods. Both are definitely worth the time, energy, and effort to read. I recommend both of them. And this is why I talk about the 4 categories of why plants are bad for us. Oxalates are one of the reasons why. Carbohydrates and fiber is the second category why plants are bad for us. Plant defense chemicals, which are secondary metabolites for preventing animals from eating plants. And then anti-nutrients. Plants have anti-nutrients in them, which basically anti-nutrients prevent critical physiological functions in the body. Good example, and I think Lee R. Keith talks about this in The Vegetarian Myth, is one of the more famous examples is from soybeans. Soybeans have an anti-nutrient in there which actually prevent our ability to utilize calcium and to utilize vitamin D, if I have that correct. This is why plants create plant defense chemicals and they create anti-nutrients, is deliberately to interfere with our ability to benefit from eating those plants. And this is so important. Unfortunately, so many people have missed that.
Yeah, I'll have to check those ones out myself. I know of one person that I've run across, and her personal story really got me to go down more into the carnivore rabbit hole myself, because she had a dramatic transformation in her health from going mainly vegan to a more carnivore based diet, and it cleaned up her skin. She had healthier hair and nails, and just her overall appearance looked a lot healthier. And so that was kind of a direct hand visual on seeing how that affected her, that got me more interested in going down the carnivore rabbit hole there.
Hey, Alabama has a couple of good comments in here. We used to soak our beans and grains before using them. That took the anti-nutrient chemicals out of them. Yep, that is something that has been, I've consistently heard this as advice from people like Dr. Chafee. He advises don't eat plants, but if you're going to eat them, you better soak them for that very reason. Absolutely, it gets rid of the anti-nutrients and the oxalates in there. And he also says, I can remember oatmeal boxes saying to soak overnight. They took it off because people stopped doing it. Yep, absolutely. Oats, same thing. Unfortunately, they're high in carbohydrates. They're almost pure carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are a not an essential macronutrient, and B, they are bad for us.
Yep. As Dr. John Bergman says, eat like your great grandmother, fresh, local, and organic. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess that's in summary what we're trying to say tonight is that that overwhelmingly, if you can cook from home and either from locally sourced food or food that you grew yourself, then it's going to be a lot healthier, and highlighted some of the things that are going on with the food distribution around the country, specifically with restaurants, how they're cooking their food, and how that might not be so great for your wallet and your overall health. So with that, man, Jay, where can people find you, follow you, support whatever you got going on right now?
All right, as we can see in the scroll at the bottom of the screen, we have Bitcoin, Huntsville, crypto, and coffee on meetup.com. If you set your location to Huntsville, Alabama, and look up Bitcoin, Huntsville, crypto, and coffee, you can see our meetup group and our missions to help people understand what Bitcoin is, how Bitcoin works under the hood, and understand why Bitcoin is, in my humble opinion, the ultimate freedom accelerator, because it separates the state from money, and that's what we need. Whenever the state, whenever government gets its hand in the money supply, invariably it will ruin the money supply, it ruins the citizenry, and eventually that country, that state heads for bankruptcy. And they, almost by definition, they use currencies, they use inflation as a means of curtailing the individual rights, the liberties of its own people. So the sooner we can get to a status where the state can no longer control the money supply, the sooner we can live in a state of individual liberty where our rights are respected. And we see time and time again for about 2,200 years, whenever countries had a hard money standard, typically gold and silver, then those countries flourished. Their citizenry were able to depend upon the state from the point of view of if they had a rule of law, and if the state wasn't going to interfere with their rights. People could engage in investing, risk-taking behavior. They could engage in wealth creation through capital investment, and that is what ultimately brings up the wealth of a nation, if you will, is through that capital investment, that risk-taking, that innovation on an individual basis. And the only way that can happen really is through a hard money standard, and that's what we're trying to promote. We want people to be able to exercise their own rights, and we think Bitcoin is one of the best ways to do that. So look up Bitcoin, Huntsville, crypto, and coffee on meetup.com, and hopefully we'll see you there. We meet twice a month, typically on the fourth Wednesday and fourth Saturday of the month. And it's a great group of people. We meet virtually online, and we have people literally from all over the world who attend. And it's a good group of people. We have people from all levels of experience and history of Bitcoin. I'm pretty fortunate. I've been involved with Bitcoin since late 2012. I've purchased some Bitcoin, I've mined for some Bitcoin, and I've tried to learn as much as I can. And we have tried just to help so many newbies to be comfortable with this really weird, vague thing called Bitcoin. And it's we want people to be prepared for what's coming in the future.
Well, excellent, guys. Go check out Jay's Bitcoin meetup group. And hey, Alabama, thank you so much for hanging out. We must be on a similar algorithm because a lot of the folks that you're mentioning, I've been following for a while. So thank you so much for coming to hang out with us. And guys, like, subscribe, share the show for folks that it'd be helpful for. And stick around. We do this every other Thursday. Sometimes we have to change the day, but we attempt to do this live on Thursday, every other Thursday with myself and Jay. So we'll go into different topics and do some dives on some different topics to see if we can provide some value to you folks out there that might be listening, and hopefully give you some useful tools that you can use to empower yourselves. So with that, thank you guys for stopping by, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you, friends. Be well.
Peace.